Now let's talk about on the programming language, especially related to the computing system. Any computing system, 0 and 1 is the only language that any modern computing system understand. Okay, I'm not talking about a computing system that Charles Babbage created. That's a mechanical computing system. Sometimes there are electromechanical computing system as well. Those are the different things. But all electronic computing system to that, the digital computers, are basically uh, accustomed to just 0 and 1, bunch of 0 and 1. So this is practically the things they understand. They don't understand anything else. Okay, so that's one thing. Then how do we understand, or how do we create program in a language which contains only 0 and 1, right? So that's the question. So the language that machine understand or computing system understand, that's called a machine language, and it looks like this series of zeros, 0 and 1. And believe me, this whole thing is a perfectly good MIPS program. This is a MIPS, one valid MIPS program, at least a piece, at a part of a big program, which is and can be executed by a MIPS processor. Okay, though for us, we are so sad, right? Like this person, like we don't understand anything. It's just look gibberish, right? Then what we can do, we have seen from the number system, this is a big series of bits, so we can actually compact this representation in a hex format, right? Which is, well, it's compacted, but now no one is happy. Computer doesn't understand this. We don't understand this. So, but why we are, what we are doing going from here? Now, from here, this same program, okay, so this is a binary representation, same program is represented in a hex code, same program represented in something like an assembly language. Okay, so don't worry if you don't understand all this part, we'll understand later or in this class successive, but we kind of understand what's going on, like at least something like, okay, this is maybe an addition operation, maybe this is a shift left, if we know these acronyms, right? And this is maybe subtraction, a logical and, this may be a jump to some point like L2, push, push and pop, maybe some stack is involved. So it kind of overall kind of understand little bit on this part. Computing system doesn't even understand this part. Okay? Like this. Okay, they only understand 0 and 1. Now from this, the high level language, if we present this, the same code, okay, high level language, now we understand. Probably, like we understand. And so what is going on here, we are initializing two variables, j and k at 0, and then we are looping like for the 10 elements in a for loop, and we are comparing these two array position values, and if aj is less than bk, then another array we are inserting the aj value and increasing j, otherwise in the ci same position we are inserting bk, and we are doing a k things, right? So we understand this part is pretty much what it is doing, right? And if you are familiar with the merge sort algorithm, it is a part of this, right? We are picking up the smaller element from two sorted arrays and putting it in another array, that kind of part. So this is a program we understand. Now the point becomes how this program can be written for this guy, which kind of, which understands only 0 and 1, right? So that's an interesting problem. So there comes the language conversion, right? Let's say this is almost similar to like like if you go in a country where you don't know their language, and they also know your language, whatever language you understand. Like, let's say you went to a country and meet a person who doesn't even know English, like who doesn't know English, like only their native language. So what do you do if you need to communicate with that person, right? So you engage an interpreter, who is another person, and then that person knows the other person's language and also knows your language. Then you communicate your thought, your information, or whatever, your talk, to that third party, which is interpreter, who is an interpreter. That person picks up your talk, translate it into the other person's dialect, and say it, right? That's how you go and communicate with the other person who does not know your language. You put a employ and person who is an interpreter of a language. Of course, in modern days, it can be like, there are, like, I think Google is giving service for translating from one language to another. I think there are some devices in the market also which you talk in one language and it speaks back in another language, stuff like that. Those are some fancy things. So maybe in some days there won't be any needing for a human interpreter. Okay, but point is that there is an interpreter between you and the other person who doesn't know your language, right? So here in this context, we have the same idea here, right? We write program in a high level language, which is C, Java, Python, whatever, and that guy goes through a translation process, which majorly is a compiler, and which produce a program, equivalent program, in assembly level language. Okay, so this is most complex part. Or high level language be translate into an equivalent assembly level language. So that is the compiler's job. Now, once your high level program translated into an assembly level language program, then another interpreter, translator comes in, which is, we call it an assembler. So this assembler takes an assembly level language program written in an assembly language, and generate programs in machine code. So with that approach, both parties are happy, right? We write in our own high level language, get transformed into machine code, and our target machine understand that program. Okay, so that's the simple process we'll be looking at. We'll be looking more into this assembler area, little bit detail, little bit inside the assembler, how it does work. Compiler is, there are classes on the compiler in department, so if you are more interested in that, you can pick up that. I'm not sure if this is a mandatory subject or not. Maybe it's called a language study, something like that. I'm not sure, but it's majorly a compiler study that you can pick up in another subject. So we'll be focusing on the assembler in this class.